Felix suddenly finds himself blessed with an extraordinary power, allowing him to heat up women with a simple touch, driving them so crazy about him that they chase him like wildfire. Enjoying life to the full for a brief period, he soon discovers that this ability is a curse rather than a blessing. Before acquiring this power, Felix was a shy man. He worked in a public relations agency. Constantly ridiculed by his boss and suffering from unrequited love, he knew something had to change. One day, his boss Ron sees him leering at Sarah, his new client, then mocks him for not knowing how to approach women. Then Jane strikes up a conversation with Felix, in the hope that he'll flirt with her, but he makes no effort, leaving Jane disappointed. After that, Sarah approaches him and asks him to help her carry her boxes home. Felix awkwardly accepts, and they walk together past a public park, where they meet two magicians, Sviatoslav and his assistant, who are selling their seminars to the park's female visitors. During the seminar, Sviatoslav chooses Felix as a volunteer. He asks him to approach Amalia, his assistant, which he does very awkwardly because he has no experience. Feeling humiliated, Felix then goes to a bar for a drink. He sees a man enter with a couple of women running behind him. The man insists on taking a break from his women and dismisses them. Felix watches in amazement and admiration. The man reveals that he has a curse that makes him extremely attractive to women. Felix thinks it's a blessing to possess this power, but Samyaza admits he also thought it was fun until he got tired of it. He says he's tired of his situation and wants to pass the curse on to someone else. Felix tells him he'd be delighted to help. Samyaza says they have to perform a ridiculous dance, and Felix has to say, "Give it to me," then the power is passed on. After the ritual, Samyaza touches a waitress, but she turns him away instead of being attracted to him, indicating that the power has left him. Felix is confused, as Samyaza hasn't explained how it works, merely telling him not to forget to touch. The next day, while Felix is strolling in the park, he comes across several women, some of whom bump into him. He immediately arouses them. Even the saleswoman is aroused when she touches him to give him his change. Felix realizes that the magic imparted by Samyaza has worked and tests it on several women, all of whom end up pursuing him. He then sits down next to a woman and tries to touch her with a glove, to which she doesn't react. But as soon as he removes the glove, she jumps on him, as do the other women. After being pursued by and sleeping with numerous women of his choice, Felix tires of his routine. The women continue to pursue him, but he's too tired to interact with them. As night falls, 3 tireless women corner him in an alley and beg him to do it again with them. Felix demands to rest before meeting them again. The next day, at the office, Ron suspects Felix of having been with women and congratulates him on finally improving. He then sees Felix's 3 infatuated followers trying to get to him, which astonishes him even more. Felix makes an appointment with Professor Jones, an expert in cult curses, to tell him about the ability that is disrupting his daily life. The professor explains that this power originated in ancient times, more precisely in ancient Sumer, when a young man, Uruk, was fascinated by the beauty of Asahara, who didn't seem to be attracted to him. Determined to win her heart, he turned to his spiritual advisor, Saki, who taught him the ritual for making women attracted to him. Uruk succeeded, giving birth to 14 children from his relationship with Asahara before dying of a heart attack. However, he passed the power on to someone else, keeping it alive for thousands of years. Casanova, Don Juan, and even the Beatles are among those who have received this power. Leaving Professor Jones's house, Felix is unaware that Ron is following him and has overheard the entire conversation. Sviatoslav and his assistant see Felix being chased by his frenzied followers in the park and immediately recognize him as the man who failed to flirt with the girl at one of their seminars.
Do you think he got all of that from our seminar?
No, of course not.
Meanwhile, at Felix's office, Jane comes to him to make fun of him again, but this time, Felix touches her, which instantly turns her on. After coming to her senses, she tells him that Ron wants to see him in his office. Ron convinces Felix that with his talent, they can work together to excel in their careers. He asks Felix to hide under his sofa, positioning himself so that his magic hand comes out of a hole, to use the power of Excitomen to make out with Sarah. He then meets Sarah, who already has a date with him. Felix's hand touches Sarah, instantly warming her up. The plan works perfectly, and Ron does business with Sarah. The next day, Felix becomes popular and the media broadcast his abilities and interview the undulating women.
It's just so nice when he touches you!
Jane, who is in James's office, recognizes Felix on TV and says she feels something special when he touches her. James deduces that Felix has a special ability with his touch. Sarah and her choir also watch the news and discuss what kind of ability Felix has. Ron and Sviatoslav also want to possess Felix's power. Felix goes to a bar and tries to talk to desperate men who might want his power, but no one believes him. Unbeknownst to him, Sviatoslav and his assistant have disguised themselves to overhear Felix's conversation. Meanwhile, James meets with Ron and asks if Felix's ability could help him get more votes from women and ensure his victory in the next election, as well as repair his relationship with Sarah. Ron admits he knows how to get the power and tells him about the ridiculous dance. Just then, Felix enters and James perform the dance. He then touches a woman, but gets slapped in the face. Ron meets Felix and convinces him to pass on the ability to James so that he can get what he wants. Felix is troubled by the situation and meets Professor Jones again for advice. He knows that the gift must only be passed on to someone with a pure heart, otherwise someone might use it for evil purposes. However, the professor tells him that passing on the gift to someone pure of heart can only bring misfortune to the bearer, as Samyaza and Felix have experienced. He suggests that Felix pass it on to someone with a bad heart, because instead of seducing women, it will make them cast hatred and anger on him. Immediately afterwards, Felix is kidnapped by Sviatoslav and his assistant. He wakes up to see Sarah, who is also a member of Sviatoslav's sect. She's curious and demands that he touch her so she can find out what it feels like. She is overwhelmed by the sensation and passes out. Sviatoslav asks Felix to pass on the power, and Felix readily agrees. But just as they're performing the ritual, Ron enters and tells them that Felix can't pass on the ability to anyone else because he's made a deal with James. Sviatoslav stabs Ron, determined to get the power no matter what. James enters and fights for the power, but Sviatoslav defeats him too. The ritual is finally completed, and Felix succeeds in transmitting his power to Sviatoslav and is freed from the misery of being constantly pursued by women. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity, as they say. But for Sviatoslav, this was not the case at all. He immediately organizes a seminar and touches all the women in the hope that they'll be attracted to him, but they all got angry and came after him to beat him to death. Moral of the story? Tell us in the comments.
When a bunch of female followers turned on their boss, Botislav Rau got a little more than he bargained for.